So imagine your government sends you this personalized text message right on your phone, reminding you to vote. Do you feel a swell of civic pride? Or do you suddenly get this, creeping suspicion that they are trying to rig the election?
I mean, it sounds like a totally paranoid question at first,
Hmm.
because our default assumption in this digital age is that more technology, more data, it just automatically equals a better, more transparent democracy.
Right. That is like the ultimate gospel of Silicon Valley. We just assume that if we build an app for democracy or if we use big data to engage citizens, the whole system just gets cleaner. But you were stepping into today's deep dive, and we were unpacking a story that completely shatters that assumption.
It really does. It's the ultimate backfire. And what we are looking at today is not some, laboratory simulation with 100 college students taking a hypothetical survey.
No, not at all.
This was a real-world, national-scale super intervention. We are talking millions of text messages, top-tier academics from Harvard, MIT, and Sciences Po, and basically an entire nation's democratic future just hanging in the balance.
We are pulling all the mechanics of this from a massive working paper from the National Bureau of Economic Research. It was originally from 2017, revised in 2020. The title is Voter Mobilization and Trust in Electoral Institutions. Evidence from Kenya.
Yeah, and the researchers, Benjamin Marx, Vincent Pons, and Tavneet Suri, they initially just set out to measure how text messages affect voter turnout, like a standard political science study.
But what they actually uncovered is just this brutal hidden rule of human psychology.
Yeah.
And it completely dismantles the illusion of the tech fortress. It proves that the harder the state pushes you to the polls using high-tech tools, the more you assume they are profoundly corrupt.
Exactly. And to really grasp the magnitude of what these researchers stumbled into, we cannot just look at the data in a vacuum, right? We have to look at the psychological environment where this technology was actually deployed.
Which is so important.
Because you really cannot understand the spectacular failure of this 2013 Kenyan election experiment without first understanding the profound trauma of the 2007 Kenyan election.
I am so glad you brought that up because it is literally impossible to understand why people reacted the way they did without looking at that historical shadow.
Yeah.
So take me back to 2007. What actually happened?
Well, in 2007, Kenya held a general election that, initially seemed to be going okay. But as the votes were being tallied, the transparency just completely evaporated.
Like overnight.
Yeah. The media suddenly stopped broadcasting live results. The incumbent president at the time was declared the winner in this deeply contested, super hasty swearing-in ceremony.
Wow.
And the opposition obviously cried foul. And because the Electoral Commission back then could not provide transparent, verifiable data to prove who actually won.
The country just broke.
Exactly. The country's fragile political fault lines just completely shattered.
And we should clarify, these weren't just, peaceful political protests in the streets. This escalated into horrific, devastating violence.
Absolutely brutal violence. It was largely split along ethnic and tribal lines that correlated with the political coalitions. We are talking about over 1,000 people killed. And around 600,000 people were internally displaced. They were literally fleeing their homes to escape machete attacks and arson.
Just a monumental societal rupture.
Yeah.
And the economy completely cratered too, right?
It did. And the data from that time tells a chilling story about institutional trust. Before that 2007 election, trust in the old Electoral Commission was sitting at a relatively healthy 60%.
Okay, so more than half the country trusted them.
Right. But after the chaos, the lack of transparency, the resulting bloodshed, that trust didn't just dip. It fell off an absolute cliff to under 25%.
A total absolute collapse of institutional legitimacy. The state was fundamentally broken in the eyes of the citizens. So, okay, let's unpack this. Fast forward a few years. It is the lead up to the 2013 elections. The country has been desperately trying to heal.
Right. They even passed a brand new constitution in 2010.
Yes. And they completely disbanded that old, disgraced Electoral Commission. They birthed a new, fiercely independent body, the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, or the IEBC.
And the pressure on this new commission, the IEBC, is just astronomical. They are tasked with organizing what they essentially promise will be the cleanest, most transparent, most foolproof election in Kenyan history.
They're desperate to say to the public, like, hey, we are not the old guys. We are different. We are modern.
Exactly. And their chosen armor to defend against all the accusations of the past. It wasn't just, new personnel or better training. It was pure, cold technology.
Which brings us to the illusion of the tech fortress. They didn't just bring in a few computers to keep track of names on a spreadsheet. They went all in on the most advanced digital defense line that money could buy.
Oh, they spent tens of millions of dollars.
They rolled out biometric voter registration to capture fingerprints and facial data. They brought in electronic voter identification, which meant actual fingerprint scanners at the polling stations so no one could vote twice.
Right, and the absolute crown jewel of this whole operation was an electronic transmission of results system.
Because that transmission system was supposed to be the ultimate antidote to 2007.
Yeah, precisely. The whole idea was that the exact moment a polling station finished counting, the numbers would be digitally beamed straight to the National Tallying Center and broadcast to the public in real time.
So no dark rooms, no delayed announcements, no funny business.
Exactly. And the underlying philosophy driving all of this is vital to understand. The IEBC was trying to replace flawed, corruptible human subjectivity with flawless, objective digital code.
The narrative they sold the public was basically a computer cannot take a bribe.
Right. A fingerprint scanner doesn't care about your tribe. An electronic transmission system doesn't alter numbers in the dead of night.
It sounds perfect. I mean, on paper, the public is hyped, the international community is watching closely, and then Election Day actually arrives, March 4th, 2013, and we hit what we can only call the reality crash.
Yeah, it was a spectacular, almost unbelievable collision between high-tech ambitions and basic infrastructure reality.
What went wrong?
According to the European Union observation mission that was heavily monitoring the situation on the ground, 50% of those highly touted electronic identification devices completely paralyzed.
Hold on, I need to emphasize this for you listening. Yeah. Half, 50.0% of them failed.
Yes.
Imagine you are a Kenyan voter. You lived through the trauma of 2007. You wait in a massive line in the hot sun because you are promised this futuristic, ultra-secure fingerprint scan that will save your democracy.
And you get to the front of the line, and the machine is just a dead piece of plastic.
And the craziest part to me is why they were dead. Because we aren't talking about a sophisticated cyber attack by state-sponsored hackers, are we?
Not at all. It was a failure of the most embarrassingly basic logistics. They lacked generators in rural areas. They literally forgot to supply enough extension cords to plug the biometric kits in.
Are you kidding me? Extension cords.
Extension cords. You have tens of millions of dollars invested in the software and the hardware, but the physical supply chain to get electricity to a schoolhouse in a rural village completely buckled.
It is staggering. I mean, imagine trying to save a sinking ship by installing a state-of-the-art GPS system, but ignoring the massive hole in the hull. That is what we are looking at here.
And the cascading failure didn't stop at the polling stations. That electronic transmission system, the very thing meant to provide real-time transparency and stop the rumors that fueled the 2007 violence, it stalled out under the sheer volume of data.
The servers just bottlenecked.
Yeah. It eventually delivered less than half of the polling station results, and what it did deliver was way behind schedule.
So the screens at the National Tallying Center are literally freezing, the servers are timing out, the fingerprint scanners are completely dead. What do the thousands of polling staff across the country even do at that point?
They are forced to go right back to the exact same manual, paper-based, non-transparent tallying process that caused the country to burn 5 years prior.
Wow, talk about a nightmare scenario.
And just to add insult to injury, the EU report noted there was a programming error in the system that actually caused entries for rejected votes to be multiplied by 8.
Oh, no.
It was a total chaotic meltdown of the tech fortress. But what is fascinating here is how the public perceives this failure.
Right, because context is everything.
Exactly. In a high-stakes, low-trust environment, technology does not buy you the benefit of the doubt. It does the exact opposite. It puts a massive magnifying glass on your every single move.
Because when you promise absolute technological perfection and you deliver chaotic manual workarounds, the public doesn't see a glitch. They see a conspiracy.
Of course they do. If I promise you a foolproof, unhackable system, and then the screen goes dark right when my opponent starts getting votes, you aren't going to think, oh, they must have forgotten an extension cord.
No, you're going to think they unplugged it to steal the election.
Exactly. Which brings us to the mega experiment. Because while all this technological infrastructure was catastrophically failing on Election Day, something else had been happening quietly in the background over the previous week.
Yes, the super intervention. Let's dig into the methodology here, because the scale of what Marx, Pons, and Suri pulled off is just mind-blowing. In the 6 days leading up to this chaotic 2013 election, the IEBC teamed up with the researchers and Safaricom.
Safaricom being the dominant telecom operator in Kenya.
Right. We're talking about an 80% market share at the time. They are everywhere.
And the logistics of setting this up in an emerging African nation are incredible. Out of the roughly 24,000 polling stations in the entire country, the researchers managed to randomly assign over 12,000 of them into different experimental groups.
Oh.
And within those stations, there were about 8 million registered voters. Now, during the voter registration process, about 61% of those people had voluntarily provided their Safaricom cell phone numbers to the Electoral Commission.
So the academics are sitting on this massive database of millions of verified voter phone numbers tied directly to their specific polling location.
Yes.
And they decide to hit send. Over the 6 days before the election, they blast out 11 million SMS text messages to almost 2 million individual voters.
Just to put that in perspective for a second, that is roughly 14% of the entire national electorate getting pinged directly by the Government Election Commission on their personal cell phones.
It is an astronomical sample size for a political science experiment.
It really is. But what's wild is that Safaricom and the researchers didn't just blast out a single generic go vote text to everyone. They realized they had a golden opportunity to test why people vote.
Right. They wanted to see what kind of messaging actually works.
So they splintered the electorate into different psychological buckets. They divided these thousands of polling stations into a control group who received absolutely no experimental text messages and 3 distinct treatment groups.
Let's walk through these because the exact wording of these texts becomes incredibly important later.
Okay, so group 1 we can call the encouragement group. These were just basic civic nudges. They got messages like, "It is your duty to vote. Please make sure you vote in the March 4 general election."
So short, sweet, standard, get out the vote stuff.
Exactly. Then group 2 was the job info group. Now, context is key here. Kenyan voters in 2013 were facing an unprecedented, incredibly complex ballot.
Because of the new constitution, right?
Right. For the first time ever, they were voting for 6 different political positions on the exact same day: president, member of parliament, governor, senator, ward representative, and women's representative.
That is a lot to process at once. The potential for voter confusion must have been massive.
Huge. So group 2 got text messages explaining what these newly created roles actually entailed. For example, a text might say, "Your senator will help determine how many resources your county receives from the central government. Vote for a competent candidate."
Highly informative. It's treating the voter like an adult who actually needs facts.
Yes. Now, group 3 is where it gets really interesting in hindsight. This is the fairness promise group. The messages sent to this group weren't just about the voter. They were actively trying to build up the IEBC's reputation.
Ah, PR mode.
Very much so. They sent texts saying things like, "Free and fair elections are important for democracy. The IEBC is committed to strengthening the democracy. Vote on March 4.
And didn't they even brag a bit about their track record?
They did. They sent texts like, "The IEBC has managed 12 successful by-elections. As part of its mission, the IEBC has established a clean voter register."
It's basically an oath of fairness via text message.
Precisely. And the experimental design was incredibly rigorous. The researchers even randomized the saturation levels within the polling stations.
What do you mean by saturation levels?
Like in some stations, every single registered Safaricom number got the texts. In others, only 50% got them. They did this to test for spillover effects to see if the information would travel by word of mouth.
Oh, like if someone getting a text would talk to their neighbor who didn't get one and motivate them to vote too.
Exactly. It is a brilliantly designed, super robust experiment. And if you look at the immediate data right after the election, the experiment worked.
The trap is sprung.
Yep. They matched the phone numbers to the official, strict administrative voting data, like the actual physical polling sheets. Turnout went up 0.3 percentage points in the areas that received the texts.
Now, I know 0.3% might sound to you like a tiny fraction, but we have to remember the context.
Right. This was a highly charged national election with millions of voters, and the baseline turnout was already incredibly high, around 86%.
Right. When turnout is already near the absolute ceiling, moving the needle at all is incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
A 0.3 percentage point bump across a massive population is hugely statistically significant.
And it wasn't just the administrative data. Months later, the researchers conducted survey data, and the self-reported turnout among those who got the texts was up by 2 full percentage points.
So the data proves, without a doubt, that people receive the text messages, they internalize them, they discuss them with their families, and the messages successfully motivated a statistically significant number of them to physically walk to the polls.
Which is why, if you only looked at the short-term goal of voter mobilization, you would have to declare this a massive, unqualified success for political science and for the IEBC.
Okay, let me jump in here, because this is where the story logically should end, right? The academics did their job perfectly. They utilized modern telecom infrastructure to reach citizens directly. The citizens became engaged. The turnout increased.
High fives all around.
Exactly.
Right.
Shouldn't this be the part of the deep dive where everyone high fives and we roll the credits? They publish a glowing paper in a journal about how targeted SMS saves democracy, and we all go home happy.
That is what everyone expected, but that is absolutely not what happened.
That'd be close.
No, because the researchers were incredibly thorough. They didn't just want to measure turnout. They wanted to understand the long-term impact on the health of the democracy. So about 8 months after the election, they went back into the field.
8 months later.
Yeah. They conducted a massive end-line survey, tracking down thousands of these specific voters to ask them about their attitudes.
And I could only imagine how insanely difficult that is.
Yeah.
Calling up thousands of people in rural and urban Kenya 8 months after a traumatic, highly contested election and trying to get them to honestly tell you how much they trust the government.
It requires immense methodological care to avoid social desirability bias, where people just tell you what they think you want to hear. But the researchers structured the survey beautifully.
What did they ask?
They asked targeted questions. On a scale of 1 to 5, how much do you trust the IEBC? How satisfied are you with the way democracy works in Kenya? Do you believe the recent election was free and fair?
When they crunched the numbers from this survey, they discovered the unthinkable backlash.
The researchers actually call it the trust Waterloo.
Wow. Okay, this is the face-slapping twist of the entire deep dive. The government, using millions of dollars of tech, literally begged you to vote. You listened to them. You participated in the system. And now, as a direct result of receiving that text message, you absolutely despise them.
That's it. When they analyzed the survey responses, they found a glaring, incredibly negative correlation. The voters who received those friendly, civic-minded text messages reported significantly lower trust in the Electoral Commission than the people in the control group who got absolutely nothing.
It wasn't just a tiny margin of error dip either, was it?
No, trust dropped by about 4 percentage points across the board for those who got the texts. Relative to the control group's baseline trust levels, that is a 5% plunge in institutional trust, directly caused by a text message reminding you to vote.
A 5% plunge
Yeah.
just from a text. And the collateral damage didn't stop at the IEBC, right? The anger kind of metastasized.
Yeah. It did. Belief that the election was generally free and transparent crashed by 2 percentage points among text recipients. Overall satisfaction with how democracy works in Kenya plummeted by 2.6 percentage points.
Which is like an 8% relative drop.
Hmm.
Getting a text message asking you to participate in democracy fundamentally damaged your belief in the democratic system itself.
It's the ultimate paradox.
Okay, my brain is automatically trying to find an excuse for this.
Yeah.
Because on the surface, it feels so deeply, deeply irrational. I want to debunk some myths here, because I know exactly what you were thinking as you listen to this.
Go for it.
Myth number 1. Let's call it the awakened citizen. If I get a text message explaining exactly what a senator does and what a governor does, maybe my trust in the government drops simply because I am suddenly more educated.
Ah, the Enlightenment theory.
Right. I'm suddenly more aware of how flawed the system is. The text didn't make me angry. They made me a critical, enlightened citizen who demands better.
That is a very standard, very plausible political science theory. It's the idea that education breeds healthy skepticism. But the researchers anticipated this, and the data completely, utterly debunks it.
How so?
In that same end-line survey, they tested for objective political knowledge.
Wait, how do you test for that?
They essentially gave them a pop quiz.
Seriously?
Yes. They asked the respondents to name the exact date of the election, to identify the specific constitutional role of the women's representative, to name the political party of the president, and even general knowledge questions like naming the president of neighboring Uganda.
And let me guess, the people who got the texts didn't score any higher.
Zero difference. The coefficients were practically flat. The people who received the text messages were no more informed about politics than the control group.
Wow.
Furthermore, their support for the ideal of democracy, like agreeing with the statement that elections are the best way to choose leaders, remained incredibly high and completely identical to the control group.
So they didn't suddenly hate the concept of democracy. And they didn't become hyper-educated political scientists. They just specifically hated the Electoral Commission more.
Exactly. Their anger was not the product of new intellectual enlightenment.
That is wild. Okay, let's try myth number 2. The rookie frustration.
Okay, let's hear it.
The texts were designed to get people to vote, right? So maybe they convinced a bunch of apathetic first-time voters, people who usually just stay home, to finally get off the couch.
Right, the newly mobilized.
Yeah, these rookies show up, they wait in the blistering heat, the fingerprint scanner is dead, the line is a mile long, and they're just furious at the inconvenience. The veteran voters know it's always a mess. But the new guys just couldn't handle the friction, so their trust tanked.
It's a really great hypothesis, but it is also thoroughly falsified by the data. The researchers were able to isolate a very specific group in their data set: veteran voters.
Who were they?
These were people who were confirmed to have voted in the traumatic 2007 election and who also voted in the 2010 constitutional referendum.
Okay, so these are the absolute diehards. These people were absolute locks to vote. They were going to the polls whether they got a text message or not.
Exactly, and the data proves it. In the control group, over 96% of these veteran voters turned out in 2013. The text messages had absolutely zero effect on their turnout because they were already at the statistical ceiling.
Makes sense.
But here is the shocker. When you look at the N-line survey trust levels, the veteran voters who received the text messages lost just as much trust in the IEBC as the first-time voters.
Wait, really?
Yes, the trust drop was completely uniform across the board.
Wow, so it has absolutely nothing to do with being a frustrated newbie.
Not at all.
Even the seasoned veterans, the people who literally lived through the violence of 2007, the people who knew exactly how messy and terrifying Kenyan elections can be, received a friendly text message and suddenly decided the IEBC was completely untrustworthy.
This brings us to a really profound realization about civic engagement. Getting people to participate is not a cure-all. If you invite someone to a party, and when they arrive, the house is literally on fire, they do not thank you for the lovely invitation. They blame you for the burns.
I love that analogy. But I'd actually argue it's even deeper than that. Because the control group, the people who got zero text messages, they also went to the burning house.
That's true.
They also stood in the same lines. They also saw the exact same dead fingerprint scanners and experienced the same manual tallying delays. But their trust didn't drop nearly as much.
Right, the texts made it worse.
Why does the text message itself act like an accelerant to the anger? Why will a human being forgive a stupid mistake, but absolutely crucify an organization for a high-tech glitch?
You've hit on the core explanation of the entire phenomenon right there. It is what we can call the smart failure trap, and it relies on a concept called Bayesian updating.
Okay, Bayesian updating sounds like intimidating academic jargon. But it is actually a beautiful, intuitive description of how the human brain calculates reality. Let's really unpack this math of suspicion.
Let's do it.
Because this is the psychology that dictates everything from national elections to why you get infuriated when your internet provider's automated chatbot drops your call.
Simply put, Bayesian updating is how people change their beliefs based on new evidence. You start with a prior belief, you observe an event, and you update to a posterior belief.
Okay, simple F.
Now, apply this to a voter evaluating the government. Voters are constantly trying to calculate the probability of two things. Is the government competent? And is the government fair?
Right. Do they know what they're doing? And are they trying to cheat me?
Exactly. Now, think about the signal the IEBC was sending by utilizing Safaricom. By blasting out 11 million personalized SMS messages over 6 days, they weren't just saying, go vote.
No, they were sending a message about themselves.
They were broadcasting a massive, undeniable signal of high capacity. They were demonstrating to every single citizen with a cell phone that they had the database, the money, the telecom partnerships, and the logistical prowess to reach into the pockets of millions of people simultaneously.
They were flexing. The state machine was strutting its stuff, saying, look how incredibly advanced and resourced we are.
But then, on voting day, they couldn't find an extension cord. The servers crashed.
The ultimate anticlimax.
And this is where the Bayesian update becomes an anti-common sense trap.
Yeah.
If a poor, underfunded, disorganized agency fails to run an election smoothly, the voter observes the failure and updates their belief logically.
They think, well, they're just incompetent.
Right. They don't have the resources to pull this off. You attribute the failure to a lack of capacity. You might be annoyed, but you don't immediately assume malicious intent.
Right. You just think they're just dumb. They're trying their best, but they are broke.
But if a highly resourced, hyper-competent agency, one that just explicitly proved it has the power to seamlessly spam millions of cell phones, if that agency fails to plug in a scanner,
your brain automatically recalculates.
exactly, the math changes. Your brain says, wait a minute, you have the capacity, you have the money, I know you do because you texted me yesterday.
Right.
If you failed today, it wasn't because you couldn't do it, it is because you chose not to do it.
High capacity plus low delivery equals intentional fraud. That is incredible. It completely strips away the incompetence defense.
It does.
It's like going to a Michelin star restaurant. If you go to a cheap rundown diner and they serve you a completely raw frozen chicken, you think, oh, poor guy in the back, he must not know how to turn on the oven. I'm never eating here again, but whatever.
Right.
But if a world-renowned 3 Michelin star chef comes to your table and serves you a raw frozen chicken, you don't think he forgot how to cook. You think, this guy's trying to poison me on purpose.
That is the absolute perfect metaphor. You do not forgive a smart failure. You assume malice. The technology, the text messages, the high-capacity flex, it robbed the Electoral Commission of the ability to say, oops, we made a mistake.
Because they proved they were too smart to make a mistake like that.
Exactly. By proving they were capable, they inadvertently proved to the voters that their administrative failures must be a deeply coordinated conspiracy.
And the data supports this Bayesian model beautifully. When you look at how the different treatment groups reacted, remember the 3 types of texts?
Yes.
Group 1 was just go vote. Group 2 was here's what a senator does. Group 3 was the one explicitly swearing over and over, we are committed to a free and fair election. The IEBC is neutral.
Yes, and the researchers looked at the interaction between the content of the text and the resulting trust drop. And what the data shows is that the devastating crash in trust was driven almost entirely by groups 1 and 2.
Ones who didn't get the fairness promise.
Right. Those were the groups that merely saw the capacity flex. The state showing off its tech without any reassurance of intent, their trust completely tanked. It fell by nearly 0.05 standard deviations.
But Group 3, the ones who got the desperate PR messages.
Only Group 3, the text that explicitly and repeatedly promised fairness and neutrality, managed to act as a slight buffer against the backlash.
Did their trust still drop?
Their trust still dropped compared to the control group, but the drop was much smaller and not statistically significant in the same catastrophic way.
So words matter, but barely. A desperate PR campaign trying to convince people you are fair can maybe slightly slow down the bleeding, but the wound is already open.
Exactly.
Because the capacity signal, the tech flex, is just so loud, you can't unclex that muscle.
Precisely. Once the voter assumes malice because of that capacity signal, the way they interpret the failure changes completely based on their pre-existing biases and their political affiliations.
Which leads us to the darkest, most volatile part of this entire study. We have to talk about the polarization.
You do.
How does a generic text message about civic duty transform into a perceived declaration of war? To understand this, we need to look at the deeply fractured political landscape of Kenya in 2013.
The 2013 election was incredibly polarized along ethnic lines, which aligned almost perfectly with the 2 major political coalitions.
Okay, lay out the 2 sides for us.
On one side, you had the Jubilee Alliance. They were primarily supported by the Kikuyu and Kalenjin tribes, and their presidential candidate, Uhuru Kenyatta, ultimately won the election.
Okay, the winners.
On the other side, you had the Cord Coalition. They were supported heavily by the Luo and Kamba tribes. Their candidate, Raila Odinga, lost the election.
And didn't he actually challenge the results?
He did. He petitioned the Supreme Court, arguing that the technological failures of the BVR kits and the transmission system were proof of systematic rigging.
Now, I want to be incredibly clear here. To you listening, we are not taking sides. The researchers are not taking sides. We are impartially looking at how human beings, depending entirely on whether their team won or lost, reacted to the exact same technological intervention.
Right. It is what we call the polarization cleaver. The exact same text message sent from the exact same Safaricom server was interpreted in completely opposite ways depending on the outcome for the voter's tribe.
So what happened with the winners?
For the winning tribal coalitions, the Kikuyu and Kalenjin, who supported Jubilee Trust in the IEBC, stayed relatively flat, or even saw a tiny, insignificant positive bump from the texts.
Because in their minds, their guy won, so the system clearly worked, and the text messages were just a nice, modern reminder of their civic duty.
Exactly. The tech was benevolent.
But for the losing tribal coalitions.
Oh, man.
Yeah. For the Luo and Kamba voters who supported Cord, receiving those exact same text messages caused their trust in the commission to completely implode.
How bad was it?
We are talking about a massive 5.5 percentage point drop in trust, specifically among the losing tribes who got texted. Their belief that the election was fair plummeted by 7.5 points compared to losers who didn't get a text.
That is a staggering gap. Why the immense disparity?
Because of that Bayesian updating we talked about. To the losers who are already grieving a defeat, that high-tech text message wasn't a civic reminder. It was the digital footprint of the masterminds who stole their victory.
It's the Michelin star raw chicken again, but this time it's deeply personal. Exactly.
If my guy loses and the fingerprint scanner's broke, I'm already suspicious. But if my pocket buzzes with a text from the very agency running those broken scanners,
Yeah.
it feels like they're actively mocking me.
Like they're rubbing it in.
Right. We have the power to text you in your living room, and we have the power to rig the machines against your candidate, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. The technology amplifies the grievance.
And we see the ultimate tragic manifestation of this grievance when the researchers overlaid their experiment data with geographic data regarding actual physical violence.
Oh, this part is intense. To do this, they use the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project, right?
Yeah.
ACLD.
Yes.
Let's explain ACLED, because this isn't just people arguing on the internet or complaining in a survey. ACLD tracks real-world physical conflict.
ACLED is a disaggregated data collection project that tracks the locations, dates, and actors of all reported political violence and protest events.
So it's incredibly precise.
Very. In the context of this study, the researchers use ACLED to pinpoint exactly which constituencies experienced election-related violence riots, police clashes, assaults on polling centers in the days immediately following the 2013 vote.
And the numbers are grim. About 10.4% of the constituencies involved in this study experienced some form of actual physical election-related violence.
Blood in the streets.
Now, look at what happens when you combine the experimental data with the ACLED violence data. In those specific violent areas, the text messages were absolutely lethal to institutional trust.
What do you mean?
If a voter lived in a neighborhood that experienced violence and they received the mobilization texts, their trust in the Electoral Commission dropped by an extra 6.8 percentage points.
An extra 6.8 points on top of the baseline drop.
Yes.
That is a total absolute collapse of faith.
The technological care of the SMS message brutally collided with the physical reality of violence on the ground. It is a profound psychological disconnect. I mean, just imagine the scenario. You're sitting in your house, you can literally hear riots outside, you know people in your community are being hurt over contested election results.
Right.
And your phone lights up with a cheerful automated message from the government saying, the IEBC is committed to a peaceful and fair election. Have you voted?
It's grotesque. It borders on psychological torture.
It feels like institutional gaslighting.
It really does. The text message doesn't build a bridge between the state and the citizen. It proves how utterly disconnected, arrogant, and hypocritical the state is.
The reality on the ground is bleeding, but the digital avatar of the state is sending smiley-face civic reminders from a secure server.
It completely validates the worst conspiracy theories in the minds of those voters. It proves to them that the government's high-tech PR machine is just a mask, covering up gross incompetence, or worse, violent, coordinated corruption.
The technology didn't just fail to stop the social fractures, it acted as a highly combustible accelerant for them.
It poured gasoline on the whole divide.
This entire deep dive, it's heavy. And it totally destroys that naive Silicon Valley mantra of move fast and break things when applied to civic institutions. You cannot beta test democracy.
You really, really can't, which is why the conclusion of the study serves as a massive global warning.
Absolutely.
You might be listening to this right now and thinking, well, that is a fascinating historical anecdote about Kenya in 2013. That's an emerging nation with fragile institutions and tribal politics. What does that have to do with me?
Right, but look at your own phone. Look at your own country. We are all trapped in this exact same doom loop.
It is certainly the tragedy of fragile democracies. In emerging systems, institutions haven't built up decades or centuries of unquestionable reputation. They don't have a deep reservoir of public trust to draw from when things go wrong.
Right. They're starting from zero.
And in those places, aggressive self-promotion via technology is basically a suicide mission if you cannot guarantee absolutely flawless execution on the ground. But is that dynamic really so different from the West today?
It's not different at all. Look at the richest, most established nations on Earth. High-tech elections in the US, in Europe, everywhere are continually met with rampant conspiracy theories, allegations of stolen votes, and street protests.
Think about the 2020 Iowa Democratic caucuses in the United States.
Oh, that is the perfect example.
They rolled out a brand new smartphone app to report the results, promising unprecedented speed and accuracy. The app completely crashed due to coding errors and bandwidth issues.
And what was the result?
Immediate viral conspiracy theories that the Democratic National Committee was intentionally rigging the vote against certain candidates.
Exactly. The smart failure trap in action. Whenever a voting machine glitches or a reporting app crashes, the internet immediately erupts with accusations of intentional deep state rigging.
Because technology gives the public an infinite imagination about the government's power to manipulate.
That is so true. We know the government can track our data, we know they can target our phones, so we automatically assume they have the capacity to secretly, flawlessly alter tallies in a mainframe somewhere.
The perceived capacity of the state is astronomical. But the actual physical delivery of fairness, the extension cords, the server bandwidth, the human poll workers, struggles to keep up with the real-world logistics of running an election.
The technological capabilities of the state are racing forward at light speed, but the political consensus and the institutional trust required to sustain a democracy are lagging decades behind.
It's a massive mismatch.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now in your everyday life? Because this psychology scales way beyond just national elections.
It applies to almost everything.
Whether you are dealing with corporate PR, a massive tech rollout at your job, or managing a community, overselling your technological capacity while under-delivering on the physical basics will instantly turn your audience against you.
If you show off your fancy new AI customer service chatbot, but your actual phone lines drop calls and your return policy is broken, your customers won't think you're a struggling business trying your best.
Oh, they will think you are an evil corporation intentionally scamming them.
Exactly. By flexing your tech, you strip away your own incompetence defense.
Trust is not a digital commodity. You cannot code it. You cannot blast it out via an SMS gateway to a million phones. Trust is built on the slow, boring, flawless execution of the basics.
Do not buy a $1 million biometric scanner if you can't afford a $10 extension cord.
That needs to be on a bumper sticker. And recognize that when you introduce a new communication technology, you aren't just sending a message. You are sending a signal about your power.
And if you misuse that power, the blowback will be proportional to the technology you used.
Wow. Okay, I want to leave you with a chilling, forward-looking thought to mull over. We've spent this entire time talking about simple SMS text messages from 2013.
Which feels like ancient technology now.
Right. But look at the world right now. We are firmly entrenched in the era of generative AI.
It's everywhere.
So the next time your phone lights up with a hyper-personalized AI-generated message, maybe even in the flawlessly synthesized voice of a political candidate, urging you by your first name, referencing your specific neighborhood, asking you to perform a civic duty.
Yeah.
Will you feel the pride of a highly functioning democracy? Or will you feel a sudden creeping fear that you are being played?
That's the real question.
That your personal data has been weaponized by a machine that is infinitely smart, undeniably powerful, but entirely devoid of human fairness.
It's a scary thought.
The blueprint for your reaction, that primal instinct to distrust the machine when the reality on the ground feels broken, was already written in a Kenyan summer experiment years ago. Think about that.
It is a terrifying but incredibly necessary warning for the future.
Thanks for diving deep with us. See you next time.